This is Senate Appropriations, and we're continuing our work on the 2024 budget adjustment. And we have with us today, waiting patiently for us, staff from the Agency of Education, and we have the acting secretary who's with us, as well as some of your fiscal staff as well. So if you want to come up, and I don't know if you want other people to come with you.
Yes, if possible.
If you prefer to have them. This is obviously last week. So yes, welcome, and again, apologies for getting started later. We had a caucus, and somehow it always takes a bit longer, and so we appreciate your patience, and we'll get started with your request in the budget adjustment.
Wonderful. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for having us. Happy to be here. I do not recall, for the record, Heather Boucher, Interim Secretary of Education. I'll introduce our finance team in just a sec, but I cannot recall if I was slated initially to testify, if we were slated initially to testify last week. I apologize if we were. I experienced.
No, you have no basis to apologize.
Okay, great. But just to make sure that there's parity across committees, I will let you know that I had a peritonsillar abscess all week last week, which I would not wish on my worst enemy. So I had to reschedule a lot of testimony.
Well,
yeah.
I hope you're.
I'm good. I'm great. Thank you. So I'm going to introduce the AOE Fiscal Whiz team. To my direct left is Bill Bates, who I think you all met, our Chief Financial Officer. To his left is Nicole Lee. You can say it again. I'm going to say this for the last time. So Nicole is the new Brad. Brad has officially retired. Brad James.
I in the hall.
Yes, I know.
No.
Officially, well, actually, he's not officially done, but he's off the clock. Let's just say.
What is the title of that position? The new Brad.
It's the finance director.
Director of Education Finance,
yes.
right here on our.
Yeah. So this is Nicole Lee, who you'll get to know, and to my right is our deputy CFO, Sean Crisino, who you may have met before as well. I'm not sure. So we'll jump right in if that's okay.
Yes, please.
So the first item is $50,000. We're on slide 3. And we're requesting this so that, as you might recall, last year's Act 29 was a school safety bill, and it provided many new requirements, critical requirements that were related to school safety, notably policy development, implementation, training for behavioral threat assessment teams. If you're not familiar with BTA teams, they are following national best practice, a critical tool in school safety processes now, because they allow school-based teams to, there's a nationally derived process and format that you do these, and they allow local teams in the school, but also with public safety partners in the community, if there is a particular student or even a staff member that is, potentially worrisome in terms of their behavior, the behavioral threat assessment. Potential risk, yeah. And so they're a really critical piece for our school safety efforts in the state. We have 80 teams that have currently formed in our school districts. That's obviously, we have a long way to go in terms of forming BTA teams in all of our schools. And this money would actually provide a critical piece of just one aspect of the training that we need to make sure we deploy for the field. So it would fund a professional development conference, and it would be in the spring. And why this is really critical for us is because it would bring together, both in terms of planning and then implementing the training, the Agency of Education, the Vermont School Safety Center, and then our Office of Racial Equity, to make sure that the behavioral threat assessment training is really making sure that we're not disadvantaging some of our most vulnerable youth just by the nature of doing the behavioral threat assessment. So for instance, our
I have a
students
question. Act 29, did it carry an appropriation? And is this something that was anticipated, or is this over and above something that was funded?
It's over and above, and I think what happened is there was a lot of activity with Act 29 in the final weeks of the session, particularly around the behavioral threat assessment being hammered out. And so I think it was lost through the cracks because of that. And the role of the AOE in the school safety center wasn't really hammered out until late in the session. And so I think at one point, for instance, we weren't even sure that the behavioral threat assessment was going to be going forward as part of the bill. So I think that's where the oversight came from.
Questions
Typically, it
about
would have been
that?
in our regular budget. Questions? Okay. And then the second item is $20,000 for the school safety center operations itself. So we have a longstanding state contract for Vermont School Safety Center. It have folks met Rob Evans, who's the director of the School Safety Center? I'm not sure if you would have or not, but they provide some.
At your agency?
No, this is a contract with another entity.
With not public safety.
So this is funded by both. So it's a school safety center. So it's
Rob, I'm just trying to, where does Rob?
Rob is the director of the school safety center, but it's a contracted entity.
He works for.
Yes. So we have a
I was like, is he in state government when you've been here?
It's a little more convoluted than that even, but I will try and walk you through. So he is he's a contracted entity.
Okay.
We also have Sunny Erickson, who is employed by the Department of Public Safety, I believe, and she is part of the School Safety Center. So we have this longstanding contract that we share, both AOE and the Department of Public Safety share, to operate this school safety center. And they provide significant training on all kinds of safety drills, consultation. As one example, the recent event that occurred in Heinsberg, Rob Evans was right there. He was helping that community debrief and
The
get
center,
through.
those two people.
Yeah,
That's the center.
that's the center. And we now have a new small team at the Agency of Education who has a school, safe and healthy schools coordinator who is just hired actually last week. But yeah, so this is, we have a contract with them. This is shared with DPS. And I think just as a matter of cost of living, the contract came in at how much more this year?
It's $20,000 higher. It had been $42,000 for quite some years, and the new contract amount is now $62,000.
So this
Our
is your
portion.
portion.
Our portion.
Yes, our
And
portion
so
is
is public safety coming in with their portion? I don't, well, that's not your concern, but it's like if.
Yeah, they may have, they would have known
They
about the
may-
increase earlier than we did, so.
Oh, my goodness, SSDDMS contract reduction. Could you help us with all those letters?
I could, and I'm actually going to,
I mean, I could do all kinds of things, social security, disability determination.
data management system is the end. So it's the state school district
District
data management system. So this is,
School district.
Yeah.
The management system. Current version of the unified chart of accounts.
yes, although the unified
Brings
chart of
back a
accounts.
lot of bad memories from that.
Yes, it did for many of the folks sitting with me as well. So, but just to clarify, so the uniform chart of accounts is functional. It's all districts have to report on the universal chart of accounts. So we are able to get that information.
Consistent data then.
Yes, not all of them use e-finance, which is what the broader SSDDMS contract was about. So it had other, like, it was to also get uniformity and cost savings on HR functions, payroll, those kinds of things. So last year, the General Assembly put a pause on that program. So, stopped.
We had extended and extended.
Yeah, I know, I remember when I was on education, we talked.
I'm calling it a pause because in our when we testified with House Appropriations, there seemed to be some concern about the fact that it was stopped. So it was stopped. I don't think, not for today, but like I think that there is a reasonable question about like what did we get from it? Should we pursue it in the future? But today, what we're asking, because it was stopped, we actually have $1 million that is kind of extra in that account. And at the same time, we have been funding our federally required statewide assessment through our federal funds from US Ed. But we've been pretty much every year funding that statewide assessment work through carryover from the year before.
So using the contract reduction to.
Yes, so that's what we're asking.
It's convenient, it's $1 million in both cases.
Yes. And I don't think that was by design. I think that was just, I think that was it by
just
design?
Convenient and serendipity.
Yeah, it's a shifting that.
Shifting.
Yeah.
Do you want to speak more about like this just from a technical perspective?
Yeah,
If that's okay.
our assessment contract came in quite a bit higher than it had been in the past for several reasons, and we were able to withstand the increase with carryover in the federal dollars. But you can't sustain using carryover to bail out current year expenses forever. So this is the year where we would run out of.
So the contract reduction, is that an ongoing then savings that you have available to apply to an ongoing cost? It's not a one-time, in other words.
Correct. So the savings on the SSDMS side would be ongoing.
So on the, you're saying we've got statewide data. So one of the things, obviously, that's a big topic is, anticipated cost of our K through 12 system, the tax implications, et cetera. If we were to see more like drill down in terms of where, obviously, some people kind of looked at what are the workforce, how the workforce may have changed over a period of time, a number of direct instructors versus administrative or consultative positions. Is that available then through your data collection system now?
We do collect annually FTEs on, I don't know if that's part of the universal chart of accounts or if that's a separate data collection, but that's what we've used in the past to look at some of those.
And is it possible to look at different categories of workforce?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do a teacher staff collection. We do it, I think it's due early December, and it's on the current year. It's one of the few times we collect on the current year data. So, that's one of the collections we pull directly from eFinance for the ones who are on it, and the other ones have to submit through a web form.
But you get it.
Yes.
You get it, okay.
We'd be happy to come back in.
Well, the reason, obviously, we're getting a lot of discussion in terms of what our staffing needs. I met with some superintendents and they were talking about, well, one school had actually hired a full-time psychologist and they're hiring clinicians. It would be very helpful to see because what we have here is, for example, I think a collateral impact for disappointment or dissatisfaction with the level of services community-based mental health agencies can provide. On the other hand, when you give them a 3% or no increase in level funded delivery system, you're going to get what you pay for. And so to some extent, then if you're not getting it one place, then are you in fact, and it would be, for me, I would find it very helpful kind of to see how that trend might be, or how a budgetary decision to constrain the level of funding for those community-based programs that directly support students or families might be impacting the very daily lives of the students or the problems that obviously you're going to see in the classroom.
I think you would see more, Madam Chair, I can say without any doubt that you would see more pressure than on the education front, because I think schools feel that, you know, they have to support students where they are. So, you know, they can't really abide waiting lists, for instance, which is very common. And part of that is because they're under federal regulation for special education and those kinds of things. But we've already been seeing,
Well, the
just
one
as you
advantage,
mentioned,
you know, oh, sorry, go ahead.
well, just as you mentioned, we've already been seeing more and more of the education fund being used for mental health. So I think I think what you were saying is to remove funding from regular mental health, it would have an impact on the ed fund for certain.
Just add more pressure.
But is your question more like, is there evidence of those positions being kind of switched from the community agency to the schools to meet that pressure?
I think what,
Could
you know,
you get that number from the FTE data, like this is the
it would,
more counselors?
right, it could help. The advantage, of course, you've got 6 that's beyond 6, which allows matching, and the Medicaid dollars obviously help underwrite the cost because it's because of the federal dollars that would flow.
But we have more and more schools that are saying we can't wait, and so we're actually going to go on our own and just pay full freight out of our education budget dollars.
Well, right, so that's exactly what I'm trying to understand a bit better, how that dynamic.
We've been doing a lot of
well, the reason I'm raising the issue is if I were a betting person, which I'm not, I wouldn't be surprised if the governor's budget brings in a level funded request for our entire mental health delivery system. So when you're looking at no increase level funding and you've got staffing, et cetera, you're going to have actually a diminution of services or a greater workforce problem. So, I'm just saying we're seeing a fairly high rate of spending in one area. What happens with the low, and what is that interplay between the two? Not obviously dollar for dollar, but I think it might be helpful to understand what are those changes that may have happened over the, let's say, last 5 years or something like that. So
yeah,
if you understand what I'm trying to.
Absolutely, and Department of Mental Health and AOE have been working together on this topic for a couple of years now. So we have a project. It's not updated. It's still kind of 2 years behind, but it's to actually map out just this question. Part of the problem is that we don't have, as either of our state entities, we don't have a way to capture. And this is above and beyond your question, but we don't have a way to capture any private contracts. So if an LEA is contracting with like a
privately
clinical psychologist that's in the community to provide that information, we don't really have access to that. So there are some, with the FTE data, we'd be happy to share and bring that in, but it's never, we're struggling with like, what is the whole picture? And so we're kind of, trying to build this patchwork quilt to try and get it.
And so when we hear things like, where is the growth in the supervisory union level versus the direct instruction and so forth, and it's I'm sure over time we're seeing some trends, but I don't know what they are because I don't have the I don't have a sense of what the data would show. But Senator Lyons.
Well, I was just going to say this is really one of the most critical things that we need to be looking at right now in terms of counseling availability, particularly in middle schools where you are upstream from some of the more devastating effects. So just looking at middle schools and what's needed there. I mean, I know folks working, for example, at the Middlebury Middle School, and they still have needs, even though they have CSAC coming in, and they have their own counselors, but something, right now, I think we need to be extremely aggressive with this, simply because we're trying to recover from the effects of the epidemic and the isolationism that kids have felt. So anything you can do would be really terrific.
And we partnered on using.
Yes, I know, we have.
Yeah,
We have.
I realize I'm kind of getting you.
No, it's okay.
I
This
don't-
is great. I can talk, so just, this is one of my areas I love to talk about. The other thing I would say, too, is that, in addition to some of the challenges on, the human services side, there's also, a real dearth of bodies, educators. So that's also, a lot of vacancies just for straight educators, if you will. And then also what we've tried to do through, the years is to try and build those supports so that they're part of more of the normative day. So using multi-tiered systems of support and education support teams and those kinds of
It was
processes.
on the news, and I can't remember what school, but actually where they were teaching and where the teachers were trained in terms of interaction with the students in a
Social emotional learning.
yes. Well, I'm sure there was a fancier term than that, but and so that was interesting in terms of how it had reduced the incidents of that required a higher level intervention and so forth. So it seems like there and some classroom teachers just have a natural ability to do that, and others need to maybe have some more instruction or whatever. But okay, well, I'm going to keep going unless we have other questions. But I think having a greater understanding of how things have evolved is good, because we're so focused on what happened with COVID. But I think there's some longer term trends here as well. I guess we're down to unusual special ed.
Yes, so there's a
That's an
theme. There's a
interesting-
theme still. We're not going to let go of the theme quite yet. So there is,
As opposed to just usual special ed.
yeah, kind of. So there's a little used. In fact, this is, to our knowledge, the first time we've gotten a request under this part of Title 16, which has been there for quite a long time. So this is subsection 2975 under Title 16, and it basically allows a district to request of the secretary, and it's interesting. I mean, it's really, it specifies what special and unique costs sort of can be, but it really is under the discretion of the secretary, which is interesting and not typically the way our law has been written. But it has not really been used historically, and we kept it that way. But we did get a request from North Country SU this year. Actually, it came late last year, I believe. I have to go back and look. So they're actually projecting a loss of special education funding of $750,000, and their special circumstances have to do with, if you might recall, there was a group of students and families who were refugees from Ukraine, and they had moved into the geographic region that would be covered by the North Country SU. And so you might not be aware, but even if students are not actually registered in the district is still responsible if there are special education costs for students. You might see, for instance, sometimes in the news, you'll see like it's called child count, and it will say, like literally in the paper, it will say, hello, like we're the school district and we're looking for any students who would qualify for special education. That's federal law that requires the district to actually look out for, try to find, and then arrange and pay for special education services for students. And so this was a pretty unique situation. My understanding is that they've now moved on. I think there was an investigation, which didn't really have anything to do with it. Yeah. So then the other piece that was compelling to us is that North Country argued that because the census-based grants under Act 173 had kicked in, but they didn't have access to the pupil weighting study to offset those particular, to offset that decline, that they were, requesting not 750,000, but 500,000. So requesting to use ed fund dollars to make this more whole.
Yes.
But wouldn't that last circumstance apply to everybody who would have benefited from the weights?
Well, that's why,
In other words, the
We-
census was
Yeah.
for everyone,
yeah,
and the weights are for everyone. So why would their particular, in other words, why wouldn't it be a systemic fix rather than a North Country fix?
well, I think it's a good question.
Or if you do it under the circumstances of North Country, are
Well,
there other
That's what I'm wondering.
similarly situated schools?
Yeah.
Well, and I think that the concern that I have and that our agency has is that this now has set precedent, but we had to follow the law, and this is the law. Basically, if they make a reasonable case, then the secretary's discretion kicks in. In this case, particularly with the unique situation of the refugees from Ukraine, it did seem to meet that. They could never have just used Act 173. That's actually not allowed. They made the case that it was the unique combination, which I understand your point. They all could say that now.
Could I just ask about the refugees?
Yep.
Is the point that among the refugee community, there were children who needed special ed services
And they needed intense special ed services. like
with
their students.
translation and other?
And they came in with, I think, pretty significant disabilities
Understood.
that needed they needed a lot of care.
Yeah, so that makes perfect sense to me, and that's always how I've understood that particular piece in Title 16. I'm just confused about how the weights could possibly commit to it.
I think what they were arguing at the district level is that they were,
I know they're arguing it.
Yeah.
I just don't see logically how it makes any sense.
Makes it unique.
yeah. I have to go back and look, but we deemed it compelling, and I'd have to go back and look at, it might have even been that the bulk of this was from the unique situation of the refugee students, so I have to go back and look at that.
And again, to be clear, North Country should get, help with the unusual special ed. I'm not at all talking about that, but the weights has been a glitchy rollout, and I would hate to see more confusion develop because a precedent is set in a case where it shouldn't have been used, but then other communities feel that they've been not given similar consideration.
I am concerned about a precedent being set. Maybe it should go away.
I understood you to say you had already made the payment.
Well, I did.
Oh.
I had to follow the laws that currently states, so that's already been done. But in terms of future, maybe it needs some attention to clarify that. Because right now, all it says is you can't use the census-based funding from 173.
But you can just, under 173, just say, school districts, we have this unusual or extraordinary cost, so we're asking the secretary for that money. You don't need to have another reason.
No.
Okay, I thought
But
you were
that's
saying you
also
had to
not
combine it
under,
with the two. You
well,
couldn't
that's what
just-
they did. That's
Right,
what
I thought you said you
they-
needed to, you couldn't just use 173.
No, you can't, in the law, in the special 2975, you cannot just say the reason we're asking for this is because we didn't get enough money from our census-based funding.
Right, but you could say there was an extraordinary circumstance that we had 12 refugees. That you can use as a reason.
Yes, and they went further and made a different
Right, I
case,
get
which
that.
was not just about the census-based funding, it was
Right.
about the combo of the two.
But they didn't need to.
But wouldn't other schools like Winooski in the past have been able to make the same argument?
Yeah.
Or, I don't,
Yeah, right now it's
They're all-
just
they're all
12
identical,
refugees,
just
right.
but many more. But anyway,
The money's gone.
Yeah.
yeah,
It was, yeah, the decision was made, so yes, and we're bringing it to you in full faith, because like, this was the first time it's ever been.
And it's
Leverage.
relatively new law anyway.
No, it's been on the books for a long
I
time.
thought it was just part of the census when we switched. to
it's
the
just
census.
very jealously guarded.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because we have not, I think we were actually a little surprised, like Brad was surprised, and had never seen it, but it is in the law, and so. we
Well, I
have
guess
to-
it's something maybe we need to look at.
Yeah,
Senator Strong.
I was just wondering, I live up there, how many students did this involve? Because, it's quite a lot of money.
Well, but it is quite a lot of money, but when you're talking about special education services, all kinds of things, they do rack up pretty quickly. So if you need one-on-one occupational therapy work, one-on-one emotional disturbance work, I don't know what those details are. I
But
can give them for you.
you received, I would expect you must had to receive bills or something to justify
Yeah, the
your
district
payment.
has that.
And this was not, those kids weren't there for academic year, were they?
No, but that's why this was so unique, because they came in, they weren't anticipated, they didn't go through the regular state or federal refugee program, they came in a different way, and so there was no preparation for them, but the district still.
And how long were they students in the school? It wasn't a full year, was it?
No, but I think they were there at the beginning of the school year, and then I think into it, and so those costs would have needed to have been, come from somewhere.
Right, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
if it were, this could be just for a partial school year, depending on when that program, the families moved.
Yeah, I certainly we could go back and get the invoices and all that stuff, we can do that.
I'm gonna keep going because we're getting into a much larger discussion.
Okay,
Extraordinary, some more
Yeah.
extraordinary, and we had it unusual, now we have extraordinary.
yes,
This was-
your language, with all due respect.
I'm sure, I'm making a comment on it.
So the extraordinary reimbursements are typically for, unlike the last case we talked about, are typically for if you have a particular student who needs something unique and extraordinary. So it's that there are no services that can be met in the community or in the state, and so they have to be sent away. They need those services out of state, and the LEA has to pay for them, is obligated, responsible for
How
paying
many,
for them.
how many students are we actually funding their education outside Vermont because of their, and Tony Campbell used to do this, but that would be like 40 years ago. And they were very carefully reviewed and before any program was approved for a student to go out of state.
They are still very carefully reviewed, and so we have a bunch of residential students, and then what we're discussing now is the extraordinary. And I don't have a number for you on exactly how many, but I will say based on our Budget Adjustment Act and then our projection for 25, the number of students is increasing who need these services. They have higher needs for those students, population, and we can certainly get back to you on a number. I'm just a little hesitant. Being a little new, have a number in my head, but I want to check it before I give it to you.
But this is over and above what would be your normal base experience. This is
Yes.
higher.
Yep. And so we did a projection for 24 recently when we made our December 15th payment. And we are estimating that we will need, actually, there's a little bit of sort of smoke and mirrors is the wrong phrase, but I'm going with it here. So we're actually asking for $5 million in extraordinary. That would be over and above the appropriation that was made and also the carry forward in that section. And then why that says 3.1 is With that, there was a census block grant error made in fiscal year '24. Estimates are given to the districts budget based on those estimates. When the error was found, we let the districts know that 45 of the 52 would be receiving less money because they had budgeted for it. They, the VSA.
Yeah, we know
Okay.
all about that, to correct it. We understand. We got actually a communication from, I can't remember which,
The fees,
yeah. Mhm.
probably visit and.
I think so. Outlining that there had been an error and that they had been given a different figure and that's what they've been using for, building.
And the error is now correct and will not be made in future.
Well, one would hope so, but one also knows that sometimes things do happen, so even with the best of intentions, but obviously it's something that you don't want to have a matter of practice. And then we have,
Can I ask a quick question on extraordinary?
yeah,
I'll try to be quick. Was that part of switching to the census grants? Because before they would just get reimbursed for that, now they have to have a different process to.
So the process is the same, but the calculation has changed in Act 173, and so the districts are receiving more reimbursement.
okay.
And I would say, and we do know as well, from hearing from district after district after district, that the student needs are more acute as well. So I think you've got both of those pressures. And we don't have enough in-state types of programs. Okay, moving on.
Yes, we should.
So the next one has to do with, I would say more a correction based on a required CTE payment that went to the wrong account and then was sent back and just missed the July 1st deadline, it sounds like. And so it's really kind of
A technical correction more than.
can you talk to it, Sean? Is it more of a technical correction?
Yeah, so normally there's some cushion in this appropriation. This is the big adjusted ed fund line. And these type of things happen and we would just pay it with carryover. But in last year's big bill, any balance that was left in this budget line was transferred to the PCB line.
Mhm.
So we had nothing to take.
Oh, the
Take
cushion
care.
got taken
Yeah.
away?
Right, and there wasn't really much this year. So we owed the tech center this money, we paid them early '24, FY '24. So we're just short of that. In the end, we just need additional money to cover it.
Right. This is all, to some extent, my question is, what is the interplay between some of this, it's this one time versus sort of your projection that came out in the tax letter? Or just for example, the 7.3, it's just simply a matter of timing, it's as opposed to additional.
I think we did confirm that, right? That
So it is additional money we're asking for, but it is also a matter of timing. We give the best estimate that we can for the big bill. This additional 7.3 is related to finalizing the calculation after all the voter approved budgets are received.
is your question now a little bit different, Madam Chair, about like this whole package and how that relates to current?
Yeah, to what extent,
Yeah.
if anything is kind of ongoing, is reflected in the calculation of what that projected tax rate that was in the treasurer's letter in December. That's what I'm asking. Is there anything that wasn't accommodated that actually would make that 18.2% or whatever higher? I guess that's really the heart of my question. I think you understood what I was
Yeah, and I don't have the answer to that. I don't think any of us do, unless you do, Nicole, and part of it is because the way we actually do the budget adjustment acts, I don't know if these are provided ahead of time to the tax commissioner. So I need to go back and just, I should be able to get this to you by today.
Okay,
like
that's
whether-
fine,
Yeah.
I was just wondering.
I think it's accounted for, as I said earlier, I just don't know where it's accounted for, and that's really critical, obviously, and so I need to clarify that.
Other questions about the sheet here? Otherwise, you have a lot more pages here.
We have, I did want to talk about one piece of the Budget Adjustment Act, which isn't really a fiscal ask per se, which is, so last year in the budget, in the big bill, there was a universal after-school grants program set up. You may recall.
I do remember, and we got the problem because all the sales tax went into the ed fund, but some of the after-school programs are not administered by LEAs. They're like the Y, Boys and Girls Club.
Yes.
So I assume that's what you're
Yes,
referring
and
to.
so our ask is that we have set up so as soon as we found this out at the AOE, we contacted the legislature and we contacted Catherine Benham and said, hey, this isn't gonna work.
No, we're gonna do a special fund.
Yeah, and so now we're asking, because I think we together thought that was probably the best approach
We
to put it into a
did.
special fund.
We did, because the Act 60 and what are permissible expenditures out of the ed fund, it ran counter to that, because we, I guess, thinking about that interplay between all the sales tax going into the education fund and that new dedicated additional sales tax with cannabis. So that's what we thought was the simplest way. I do know that we were hoping that maybe the amount that had come in was somewhat aligned with the actual amount expended by the LEAs, and then anything after a date would go, but I guess that didn't work.
I think that they're, for folks, including us, who are very supportive of this mixed delivery model, because we really do want to make sure that every community has has at least one option for students. I think that there's some concern in the field of, for instance, community organizations, nonprofits, that it should kind of be all in the same pot, or it advantages the school districts to kind of allot that money first, and then the second pot is for everyone. So it's just more of that kind of concern that we're hearing.
That the LEAs wanted to grant the money out to the Ys? I thought that.
No.
They didn't
So
want to get into that role.
Right, so right now there are monies in the ed fund. They can only go to
I
the
know.
LEAs. They can only go to the
But we
LEAs.
figured out a
Yeah,
mechanism to deal with that.
we did. But if the monies that are still there, I mean, I think I misunderstood you, because if the monies that are still, the way we've suggested is those existing monies in the ed fund, all of it, and to come, just goes into a special fund. So keeping some in that initial ed fund is restrictive, and there's a lot of folks in the field that are frustrated by that. That's all I meant. The portion that's already gone from cannabis revenue, tax revenue into the ed fund is what I'm talking about. Does that make sense?
I do understand, but we'll have to have further discussion in terms of the mechanics of that.
Okay.
I was hoping that if we dealt with a partial year revenue with sales tax, that what the LEAs needed and were paying for would be about the same as the amount that went into the ed fund, which is a permissible expenditure, and then we would do the balance of the revenues to after school, depending on how that split looked. But I don't think that worked.
No, because the way the law is written, it's a grant. It's just one, because that would mean two different grant programs, as opposed to it's one, and these are the different applicants who may apply.
Yeah. So, but we had a conversation, Senator Lyons was in on that in terms of what the intent was, to have that mixed delivery, to have those other programs benefit from this new revenue source from cannabis sales.
And there are some communities where the school district doesn't have the capacity to get another grant on their own. By the way, there are, just if you're curious, and I promise I'll be quiet, but there are priority points. So I know that some folks, not necessarily in this committee, but some folks in the General Assembly have been concerned that it's pulling dollars away from LEAs. And one of the absolute priorities, 2 out of 3 have to be met for the grant program, is that there's a partnership with school and community. Then the other, community entity and school, at least one school. Then the others are a priority around ensuring that students with special needs have access to the program, and then also geographic areas where there really is no after school at all. And so we're trying to actually look out for those areas, because there are some, I'm thinking of Essex County, where there just isn't there isn't any action coming from the school for good reasons.
Well,
They're
some of the
really
schools
swamped.
in New Hampshire,
Yeah, that's an example too. Yeah.
a lot of, along the border, those very small towns. Guildhall, I think, was maybe the last to, go. All right, well, we're trying to figure out the mechanics of that, obviously, and, but we're gonna create a special fund for those, and we can identify those campus revenues, so.
Would you like us to go through reversions and carryover?
Sure, we can do that quickly.
Okay. I'm gonna
Look at the web.
actually, do you wanna, how about I switch seats with you?
We have the chair meeting.
Well, I'm going to hold my carpool, anticipating we were gonna have crappy weather. I know you're up here. So
It's beautiful weather, what do you think?
Well,
You can-
beautiful.
You can zoom in on your way home.
I think between Marshfield and West Danville, there is nothing.
In a snowstorm.
Sure. All right, so we're gonna go through very quickly. These are just very quick reversions and starting on, what? 100 versions and reversions?
Well, there's a 3-cent one to start off with.
I know, I'd like to spend a lot of time on page 6.
Yeah.
You're dealing with the accountants now, the bean counters.
Look, I balance my checkbook, all of them, every month, and I will spend hours looking for 3 cents because it's a challenge.
You and I both, yes.
So, the only problem is I got like 5 checkbooks, so it's a challenge. All right, 3 cents. I'm not gonna spend any more time on it. We're going to page 7. And that is where,
And
you have a lot.
services, and Sean, you highlighted in earlier testimony, the big one here is the 95,000 for the pay act.
Yeah.
The rest of it is ongoing, regular anticipated expenditures that will come through in service.
just a matter of timing then.
Yeah. And that's really the case on every single one of these appropriations. And to the extent that we don't have outstanding purchase orders, or we don't have outstanding sub-grant agreements that we were going to carry over for, we're going to revert it. So on page 8, you can see.
I can see you're gonna revert $136.13.
Yes.
But you're gonna carry forward almost 343. All right. Because you've already obligated it and you just need the money
Yes,
carried forward to pay your obligation.
that is correct.
But 100, that just shows how, what kind of a mind you have to.
To be an accountant.
To be an accountant. Flexible pathways, dual enrollment, once again, carry forward. Page 9.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yes,
And this is to the secretary. Is dual enrollment still overwhelmingly female students? Has that shifted?
We've made some progress in terms of students who qualify for free and reduced lunch, but we still have the gender gap.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see what's to be done about it.
that just permeates all of higher education, that's
Sure.
60-40.
Yeah.
And some schools are really working hard to get it back down to 60, because it's been up to 70.
Yeah, you
Oh,
have
Yeah,
reported.
Okay, other questions on that? Other than this is just the getting things trued up.
That's exactly right. So at the end of the year, 6:30 comes about, Sean and his team close the books, and then we take a look at outstanding purchase orders and grant obligations, and it's truing the books up. And then if we don't have any use for the funds, it becomes a reversion.
Okay, education fund, finance.
And the same thing for education fund, so we go through those appropriations, and to the extent that there's no outstanding or carry forward needs, then we're reverting it, and that starts on page 11.
Special ed.
Same thing.
Same thing.
Can I ask you, the state place students, is that going up as well? I mean, you're just carrying it forward here, but I just wondered in general, of course, seeing the state needing to place more students.
Those are children in foster care.
Just
Those-
foster care?
Yeah, they, actually, the number of children in foster care, I think, went down a bit.
The number of our children has gone down, and that could be part of it.
Right, so demographic.
Yeah, but the need is,
The number, is our number still dropping?
for all kids.
Enrollment, you talking about Sunday Star? All enrollment or just the state place students?
Yeah, I mean just kids, regardless of where they are. But the need is more, the number of our students just as a state is dropping, but the need of our students is increasing, if that makes sense. But we don't,
A good comment.
yeah, we don't have, we could get this, but it comes from DCF and we just pay it.
Is that the overall number is dropping, and or the intensity of what the students need is is
I think both.
so we have our numbers of students aren't dropping that need help, and the intensity is greater. Okay.
I wonder to what extent, and a couple of years ago, we were really concerned about Vermont having more children being brought into state custody than other states. We're an outlier. Why? Because we're not certainly the lowest in terms of poverty for all the other factors that one would consider as contributors to increased removal of children from their homes. I'm wondering if we are in fact experiencing some of that same phenomena here within our educational system. I don't know, are we an outlier compared to other neighboring states? I'm sure demographics are contributing to it, and states, and with our shrinking population and where the families that are, the students are coming from, but it raises some interesting questions about sort of the characteristics of Vermont kids, because we've also seen school outcomes, move down toward the average from what they used to be a few years ago.
Yeah, I think it's probably several factors. I think we can't disregard the impact of an opioid crisis, which tends to hit rural states harder in a lot of ways, perhaps because they haven't had the infrastructure built up like some of the more urban areas have to handle it. I also think that we're seeing more students who are homeless, so who may or may not then eventually end up in some situation of DCF. I think New England is not a hotspot in general for the population. So I think other states in New England, and not even just Maine, I think all of them as a state, at state level, are experiencing declining population, just like us. So I don't know if there's anything unique about us in that instance. I think the things that make us a little different is that we're certainly more similar to Maine, or even places like Wyoming, or like even Nebraska, because we're very rural in terms of how we deliver services and those kinds of things. Obviously, the geographic spread is very different out west. But those are sort of a couple of things that come to mind off the top of my head. I think it's a great question, though. I'm going to keep pondering and getting some answers on.
Well, as we're under flexible pathways, which is carried forward again, and I think this has certainly been a very popular program.
And half is funded Gen Fund, half is funded Ed Fund. Call this is the same.
We'll keep going to page 15 then. Unless there are any questions on spending.
I have a question on the
Yeah.
small schools grant.
But let me, so we transferred on slide 15, that's a transfer as opposed to a carry forward or reversion.
Yeah,
And so I don't know what 510089.
You don't have that memorized?
Per act, whatever it is,
yeah.
but
it's a
whatever you
PCB.
did, huh?
It's a PCB appropriation.
PCB, all right, thank you, that's very helpful. I think the secretary mentioned that earlier. Thank you. All right, we can move on now to small school grants.
So does the reversion have anything to do with the changes that we made to small school grants in the People Waiting Act, which I can't remember the number, 56? Or is this,
It does not. This is a prior year, so the change of small school grants into merger support will be in 25.
okay, so in the reversions are just because of,
There is some flex in that number year over year because I'm gonna call it old, although it's current law, the old small schools grant has an average grade size component. And so as schools
Oh.
either do or don't meet that, they become eligible or ineligible each year.
And it's classroom size, not grade size, right? Average classroom size.
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
Does that mean if you have multiple grades, like a 3 and 4 in a classroom versus grades, I don't know.
If you consolidate in that way, you wouldn't meet the criteria probably for small school.
I think we combined about 3 grades in order to,
you save money on teachers, but you might lose out on your small school grade.
this is a long time before small school grant. All I know is I had a couple teachers for 3 years apiece. And if you didn't get along with those teachers, I felt sorry for the students who, didn't thrive. Technical education, to be reverted.
So same thing on this one where we've calculated the estimated sub-grant agreements and funding costs, and then whatever remains is getting reverted. Sean or Nicole, anything?
I can address this one, I think. So we, the governor's emergency education relief funds, which were part of COVID dollars, which were separate from the regular education funds, went by and large to a little bit to adult education, but by and large to CTE. And so a lot of these state funds are for what would be typically ongoing grants for programming and things like that each regular year. And because the gear funds were needing to be spent and were an infusion, the gear funds got used for most of those. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't want this to give an impression that like we don't need these funds,
No,
historically.
This is a one-time reversion,
Right.
but your base.
And no one's saying that, I know, but.
All right, universal meals on page, slide 18
Same thing.
or 19. I have 18.
Yeah, our number is one off to that number.
Yeah, because we have the PCB remediation on page, on slide 19.
I've got a hidden slide.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh.
Yeah.
Our number's off.
What?
Our page number is off.
Oh, but what about this slide?
That's
It's coming?
It's there.
It's coming. Oh, okay. Oh,
And
you mean
universal
your
meals.
pagination is wrong?
Yeah.
All right,
like a
so we have
hotel
carry
elevator.
forward here. And what is this once again, just because of, timing again?
Yeah, I think we had an appropriation for universal meals. Was this the first year? So I don't know if this is all that. It was 30 million, so we spent a lot of it, and this was the balance, I think.
Well, that's why they reduced it maybe to the, in calculating the ed fund increase,
Yeah.
the rate increase, used a figure of 25 million.
That's what I wonder, because there was some hope that it would be lower because of federal funds being maximized, and I don't know if this is a reflection of that or just timing, or a little of both.
I thought it was gonna come in at 26 instead of 29, is that?
25, 26. I think that's what they were using as their estimate on the tax rate for adding universal meals,
Appropriated 30 less.
which is 3 cents on the tax
It
rate.
was inflated to try to kill it.
That's right, Bobby always said.
Well,
Bobby was not
I
fooled.
know all about it.
Well, I think what this is reflecting still, even with the carry forward, I don't know if your estimate now is 25, 26 million, down from the third. There was some hope that the feds would lower the threshold, the percentage threshold.
They have,
And what?
they have.
They have.
Yeah, so many more schools and districts are qualified.
So I guess the question is, will that in fact have a beneficial impact on the cost here?
Yes,
It should on 25.
and we haven't prepared that today, but I can come back and we can talk about with that.
So that, that is
Good to
gonna,
know it's coming.
But it's good to, I mean, it's good for the state. That
right,
more and more schools are able to qualify for those federal dollars, obviously.
well, it makes a very, an ed fund that's under a great deal of pressure, it helps reduce it a little bit. Then for-
And sorry to go into more education policy, but the universal income form, that also was gonna get rolled out and was supposed to help with this, and also with the people waiting, if I remember correctly. Is that happening, or where are we with that?
Yeah,
Okay.
a lot more.
Yep,
So what if a family, I might say, I don't care, it's none of your business. Do you get response like that from households?
the way the law is written, it's the LEA that has to actually deal with those kind of conversations for school districts. But we did a lot of work to actually, particularly, we would say we have the best estimates we've ever had of poverty in the community and in the school districts, because we did actually use the universal income declaration form with families that we
Did we create a new one, or you guys created a new one?
I think we used a variety of different sources to get that information. Do you,
Could you just do a checklist above or below? Whatever that income cutoff is?
That is actually a little bit how it works. At the bottom, there's 2 rows and you check,
I'm below this amount or I'm above this amount?
yes.
we still are using what's called direct cert though, so the universal income form is mostly for families where they're not qualifying through other means. So if we don't have any information on that, we use the universal.
Well, I tried years ago to see, because if you're getting the EITC, you're automatically eligible.
Right.
We got nowhere, the tax department said I couldn't understand why they couldn't release to the family that was getting the EITC benefit, that they were getting the benefit, and then the family could decide whether they wanted to share that information with the school to get the eligibility established.
Madam Chair, Madam Chair, we
don't.
don't have tax involved in this one. It's just AHS and AOE.
No, I know, I understand that, but I'm just saying that would pick up another group of potentially eligible households through a very simple secondary verification. But we hit the wall of the tax department. Anyway, that's different.
It would help with a lot of benefits. If you could do that.
Now we're down to page 19, which is 20 up here. And it has to do with the PCD, and it's carried forward, obviously. Because that's certainly,
Obligated with the sub-grant agreements.
yeah. All right, well, we've certainly covered a lot of territory, a lot of it not exactly part of the budget adjustment, but we tend not to. 3 cents?
3 cents.
3 cents.
Take that.
That's the takeaway from this.
So thank you, and we'll obviously be having more conversations. Look at the weather. Look at the weather. So thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. Happy to come back.
Oh, yes, well, yeah, you got next year's budget.
Well, of course, we will be back, yes.
Madam
Unless,
Chair, Senator Sears is bogarting the carrot cake.
You weren't here for the early carrot cake dispersal process.
I don't think I've been told.
Here you go. I can give you everything.
We ran out of
No
plates
cards.
and spoons.
well, there might be some more.
You can use my plate.
That's okay.
Oh, actually, I have a spoon.
Nice, thank you.
Oh,
Chief of Police.
oh, you do?
I'm gonna take.
Oh, good luck.
you're gonna take
Good
the
job.
I think I one you got.
The Kevin,
Intern.
Yeah,
he's a great guy.
yeah.
Oh, we're really
The
running
other
behind.
people were
Is this another panel?
the numbers.
We're not having a break.
Another panel.
We're live.
Another
Okay.
police panel?
Another police panel.
I think
I remember saying.
keep, keep the present system that's in place.
Public safety. Public safety.
Save all
panel.
kinds of money on summer.
All right.
By not having.
Public safety panel.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, we're way understaffed now, so.
All right. We're gonna go on to, Sherry Clark here. And I think we were interested in sort of talk to you a bit about the EB5 settlement, which is obviously having a budgetary impact because of the amount of reimbursement from our insurer. And I think Senator Sears was kind of interested in hearing a bit more about your efforts to secure the funding as opposed to having it fall to the, on the state side.
Yep.
So it's with that, we've asked you to come, thank you.
Okay,
Well, we did read that you're getting sued by the auditor, which
Yeah.
made good press.
yes. I am.
Well,
Is that getting,
well, that's a different topic and we're already behind. So
Okay.
We're gonna go to, the additional money, it's over 9 million, I think, that is gonna be required. So if you would put yourself on the record and just brief us a bit, we'd appreciate it.
I am Charity Clark, Vermont Attorney General, and I would refer you for a lot of the nitty-gritty questions about, of course, all of this. I would refer you to the Agency of Administration, and Risk Management is the one who would know a lot about sort of the budgetary impact and the self-insurance fund that the state has and all of that. But I'm happy to answer questions about the legal components of our defense of these lawsuits, some of the background on the 85 case, our efforts vis-a-vis getting money from the insurance carrier. And
I think that was really the issue.
Insurance.
Yeah, on the insurance side.
So we were denied coverage, and the insurance carrier, AIG, denied coverage on the basis of 3 different things. We argued with them that none of them were relevant. Some of the 3 were more compelling than others. And we ultimately began the process of arbitration. And before we got to the arbitration, and this was in 2020, early in 2020, so they waited a long time to deny our claims, in other words. And before we got to an arbitration, we were mediating with the plaintiffs in the case. And as a part of that, we were able to persuade the insurer to participate in the mediation. And although they continued to deny coverage the entire time, they ultimately settled with us for a contribution to the full amount that we settled for. So it was satisfactory to all parties. What is the amount?
Yeah.
Yes, it was $850,000.
out of the, what was the total agreement?
That was
settlement.
16.5 million.
How many?
16.5 million.
That's over 3 years.
It's over 3 years, so the first year was the 9.5. The next year, I have to look because I can't do math quickly. I have this written down somewhere. Yeah, so the first year was the 9.5, and then year 2.
That's net of the 800?
Right, that's right. And year 2, we get the full 850,000 in addition to 2,150,000 from the self-liability fund. That's in year 2. In year 3.
That's from ourselves, though.
Yes, self-liability fund. Year 3 is if necessary, and the mechanism that was baked into the settlement is if the remaining roughly 150 investors who did not get a green card, we are helping to try to get them green cards. And if we are successful, each person who gets a green card, our
That's nothing.
amount gets, yeah. So and I should say, of course, they have to be meaningfully pursuing their green card. If they're not, we get that person on our column. So that's $4 million in year 3 total. We do have some left from the state liability fund. That's $100,000. So it would be $3.9 million that we would have to come up with here in the legislature. But we're working very hard to do everything we can to try to help get those green cards for those remaining investors.
Well, somebody,
comment?
well, it's strange that we get stuck with the bill.
Let me walk. I think it would be helpful for you to hear why they were denying coverage. So the first reason is they said it was time. They said it was late notice, which we disputed and didn't think that was. We disputed all 3 of their claims, but some were stronger than others. The second was there's an exemption from coverage for conduct based on the willful commission of a crime or other dishonest or fraudulent act. That one we also felt we could overcome. And the third one, in my view, is probably their strongest claim, and that was claiming that there is an exemption from coverage for conduct involving the purchase, sale, or offer for sale of any security.
What security or?
Well, we went back and forth on that. You know, the Securities and Exchange Commission, of course, famously was the one who got involved, and that's now they installed the receiver, and that's where we find ourselves. And our settlement money are going to the receiver, which is a product of the SEC enforcement action. There is, I would say, at this point, or ultimately, an unsettled question, and we would, of course, argue that there was coverage, and AIG argued that there was not coverage. And as these things go, when we are in mediation, you kind of look at the strength of their case and the strength of our case, and you try to get the best result you can, given the challenges of the case presented in front of you. So we, carefully assessed what the challenges were, the likelihood of success if we ultimately went to arbitration. It's not a regular court, it's arbitration, which is a different dynamic and a more expensive dynamic because you pay for it. So, we did the best we could and were able to secure $850,000.
So out of the total cost,
Of the 16,
pardon,
out of the 16 point,
out, what did AIG pay?
800.
$850,000. I actually asked.
16 million?
Yes, but I don't think that was the full amount of the coverage that we had. Let me just look, because I actually emailed.
Yeah, I was gonna ask,
left.
what did we ask for when we made the claim?
Here we go. They emailed me.
We can ask for the whole amount if you're sure.
Well, that
I think there
depends on
was
what the policy was.
I think there was a disagreement if I'm remembering correctly, there was a disagreement about even the potential scope of coverage, even if they hadn't denied coverage. And of course, we thought it was bigger than they thought. So we were also disputing, if I'm remembering correctly, the actual full amount based on some of the time frame on, what would trigger coverage. So we had that dispute in front of us as well.
What's frustrating is that the criminal matters were already settled before this, right?
Yeah, the timing was.
So any
right.
reimbursement from the
yeah.
criminal activity that earned them money is put onto the state. That's why I think that might be the most frustrating part for me, is they're responsible for the
Yeah, we were a victim too. The state was a victim too.
So
It
we're
is really
victims and we
frustrating.
get victimized.
That's why you buy insurance, right? To
Well,
protect
no.
yourself.
Well, depends on the
You buy
coverage
insurance
provision.
until you find out what the heck's not insured. I went through the same thing.
Sometimes
We had a
insurance to be
Insurance
used.
company that was supposed to defend us and ended up costing myself and at the time my partner $20,000. They wouldn't cover the cost, even though it took the jury 7 minutes to figure out that we weren't guilty. They wouldn't cover the cost of the trial.
But this 850,000 that they paid, it's all write-off at the end of their year
Well, it's
from
a
their
rounding error
profits.
for them.
The 15 million some odd dollars that we're gonna pay, there's no write-off to anybody except for to our
Well,
tax.
the criminal case hadn't been settled, or might have been. I don't know if they had any money left or not. They don't.
Well, it all goes into the receivership.
No,
Yeah, but we don't get we were already,
We settled and the money went to economic development in Newport, well, in the Northeast.
Chicken.
went to Star.
And the federal government had no liability in this at all?
They were the ones pursuing
Yes.
actually. I know, it's very unfortunate and we're just honestly, I haven't addressed this yet, but the major motivation for the settlement was the opportunity to procure a bar order, which is an order barring additional plaintiffs, because there were over 800 investors, each of whom invested $500,000. And less than 200 of them had sued. So there was like 700 roughly potential plaintiffs who could sue us for lots of money, including the $500,000. And instead, none of them will because we got the bar order.
This wasn't a determination that the state did something wrong. It's a determination that the state wasn't covered.
It was a determination that we had to minimize our risk of exposure, and we extinguished our risk of exposure by settling. So now there's 700 potential plaintiffs who cannot sue us because there's a bar order in place.
And we have no recourse. We have no appeal process.
Well, we
We're not
settled.
going to.
Yeah.
No, we're not going to.
This could have worked.
I suppose, yes, I guess it could have been worse if you'd opened it up. So you cut your losses, you cut what you have, but it means that, and obviously insurers, they're gonna be very vigilant about what they believe you've been paying for and what you have for coverage. And
Yeah.
I guess you probably pushed the boundaries as much as you felt you could.
That's right, and I would say we engaged outside counsel who specializes in insurance coverage, was very sophisticated, really excellent, and I think they did a really good job too. So we had a lot of advice from outside of people who were just experienced in this particular area. It wasn't just us and our experience and risk management experience. So I will say in terms of the mediation, we also had a really skilled mediator, so I felt good about the process. And in many ways, just grateful that we got where we did and were able to obtain the bar order before the receivership, went away. It's really, that was absolutely critical. So
Yes.
Is there there's only the upside if we get the green cards? Is there anything out there that could be a downside, or with the bar and any other future lawsuits that's
downside,
it? So we're
only
pretty much
upside.
done with it.
yeah,
other than the
exactly. So
upside.
after year 3, and I will say, so the mechanism is like, July 1st, but then we have a 6-month window of if the federal agency that is in charge of green cards hasn't actually made a decision yet, we still have a little bit of time. So we tried to bake in some extra protections with the time pressures that will exist, but we're working hard on, everything that we can think of to do, we're doing. And we're working with Immigration Counsel, who are experts in this as well.
Yeah, and you said you had outside counsel.
Mhm.
So how much did that cost to take off the
Additional?
850 that we got?
Well, you'll have to ask risk management that.
As
Risk management in the Agency of Administration.
They hired.
They're
They hired.
Yeah, they're the insurance, well, we help them, but they're the
I
ones
got
who
you.
know the budget. I think that would be in their budget. I can look into it and get back to you, but I don't have the figure off the top of my
I
head.
mean, most council will get 25, 40, 45%. So be interesting to know.
Yeah, I mean.
The 850, did we lose another 200 to the outside council that negotiated the 850?
I doubt it. We did spend a lot of money on lawyers in my office, for
Oh,
years.
that's not-
Yeah, since 2017.
That's not counting your law.
It's a lot.
I mean, this
Yeah.
is outside that the special counts.
Yeah, but they're specialized.
Wow, this was a very expensive, experience, lesson, and
How do we avoid it?
well, I think one of the things we learned is you can't have the same agency that's the advocate to be the, the regulator, or the
Hello.
overseer. If it's a conflict.
Yeah, I agree.
You have a healthcare bill?
I do have something on that.
So, and there was concern in terms of that whole oversight and response to complaints that were made. And we're here where we are. So 9.5 for the EB5, 850 adjusted for legal counsel, but risk management does much more. This is just, this is because it was ACCB, it was state, because of the.
Yeah, yes. And it was also individual plaintiffs who were sued. We got a lot of those individual plaintiffs dismissed from the cases, but a couple remained. So, yep.
Other questions that we have? Thank you for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you. If you have any follow-up questions, and I can, Senator Starr, I can try to get that information for you.
One more question. Seeing we got a little learning from this experience. People that handle our money, like the
The treasurer.
DMV,
Oh.
the treasurer's office, are they insured in case somebody runs away with $1 million somehow?
I will let risk management answer that because they're gonna know all about all of our insurance and I'm
Well, they
not
couldn't have known
prepared.
a whole lot
My
about it
understanding
if they let this happen.
Self-insured.
Yeah, we have the self-insurance fund, which is, but I wouldn't wanna weigh in and give you information that's not totally accurate.
Well, I think you could go back and you could look at sort of that graph that the FR put together and who knew what when and who failed to act and but we're where we are and we can maybe take a lesson from it in terms of the vigilance and the importance of oversight and sometimes things that are very desirable and you'd like to have them happen still requires sometimes difficult intervention. So, well, if we want to know more, we can talk to Kristen Clauser because I imagine risk management is in her wheelhouse.
Yes, yes, they are. And we work very closely with Kristen and with risk management in this process. They were great partners.
Well, thank you for coming over on a snowy afternoon.
Of course.
It seems to be getting worse.
I'm grateful to say that it's a short walk now because we're back in the pavilion building, so.
That must be wonderful.
Oh, I'm so happy. I've never thought I would love that building so much as having to be
Where
stuck in my own
I
house.
know the governor was up in Dill, but.
Well, we were working remotely, except we did have some temporary space that was loaned to us, so we would be able to get together in Waterbury and whatnot, but it's really nice to be back in the pavilion. I'm really sure.
Well, thank you.
All right, thank you.
So we've worked through our break because we were spending more time with
Try to-
education.
Meet at some point. We were gonna meet before the session. Maybe next week or
Yeah,
something.
because we only have the next.
Yeah, we talked. We were gonna do that, but then
Where's public safety? What is it?
They're right at the top of the spreadsheet.
she's
Oh, yeah,
zooming,
okay.
Zooming in.
Well, I don't blame her for overtime due to all the homicides and so forth. So we're gonna move right along. Commissioner, thank you. Our, next, if you've got the big spreadsheet here.
That was the original one?
And yes, the original one is, D209, and it's Public Safety, State Police, and we have the commissioner with us. Thank you, Commissioner Morrison. And, I don't think this will take too much time, but basically it's a general fund request of a little over 1.8 million, and it's really driven by the overtime costs that you've experienced because of the additional investigations, the number of homicides that the state has experienced. So you just want to give us a little background in terms of the request and what is behind the additional money that would be very helpful for us.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, senators. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Jennifer Morrison. I'm the Commissioner of Public Safety. I have my Director of Finance and Administration and the Colonel sitting with me. They're just slightly off camera, so if we get into an area where they need to jump in, I'll just rotate the camera to them. The request is very straightforward. Based on our actuals through November, we are anticipating just over a $1.8 million shortfall in our overtime for the Vermont State Police. Now that includes overtime shifts in our PSAPs and in the barracks, which is driving a lot of the cost. As you know, we're operating with approximately a 25% functional vacancy rate in all of the barracks. So we do have a lot of mandatory overtime happening due to being low on the.
How many vacancies do you have out of your number of troopers?
Sure. We are authorized for 328, and we have 53 vacancies currently.
53?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And how abnormal is that? What, do you know what an average vacancy would be over the last 10 years?
Well, if you asked us last year, we'd say it's very normal. But if you asked us about 8 years ago, I think we would be looking in the 15 to 20% was not percent. Sorry, 15. Sorry, not percent. 15 to 20 actual vacancies.
Okay. 15 to 20 positions an hour, 50 something.
Thank you. It just gives us a little perspective. So you said it's spread over state police, including the PSAP staff. So does 1.8 translate into, it's just interesting, how many hours of overtime did your department experience as a result of this workload and the vacancies? Because obviously people are having to cover as well.
So I don't know if we would have that level of detail at our fingertips. I'm looking over at Rick and thinking that would take some digging, but we can tell you that the 10 homicides that have occurred in the last 6-ish months or so were really an unprecedented amount of overtime. It's not just the detectives from the major crime unit that are called in to assist with those things. We have our crime scene search team, our victim support members, and then of course any one of those can implicate assistance from the technology investigation unit. Pretty much every major crime these days involves technology of some sort. Maybe it involves the canine or the search and rescue teams for looking for evidence or bodies or other things like that. So it's not, sometimes people think it's just investigative personnel, but it really implicates
I was just
multiple
I just
special
didn't
teams.
have a sense in total sort of what it translated into, I hate to use the term man hours, person hours.
Sure, I can tell you that it's hundreds, if not thousands of hours per major crime by the time all expenses are tallied up. And if that number is important to you, we can try to break something down to approximate what an average homicide case might incur.
It's already it just sort of helps to understand sort of the demands that you've been you've experienced over the last few months.
Yeah, this has been an unprecedented run here in the last 6 months or so. It's been extremely busy, extremely taxing, as you know, even with 328, but that's not that many folks by the time you rotate them through day shift and night shift, and it's been a lot. Men and women have held up well. and we're still able to attend to our regular duties, and we make sure that there's always somebody there to answer the call when Vermonters need us. But yes, you are correct. This has been a rough stretch.
Questions you have of the commissioner?
And so that's the extent of it. There's nothing in the BA about the favorite topic, the public safety telecommunications money that we dealt with last year.
I believe that in the BAA, you will see House Gov Ops offer a strikeout in 2 places that removes the reference just to the year 2024. So that the access to the second $1 million for technical expertise and subject matter experts that request would go through the JFC, but it takes out the requirement that it happened in 2023. And likewise, the $4.5 million that was sort of set aside for pilot projects also said in 2023, but obviously that didn't happen. So I believe that's all you're going to see coming for the BAA, is striking out the requirement that had happened in 2023.
Other questions? So those are the changes, just in the dates, and obviously the need for additional money because of the overtime costs that you experienced. Well, let's hope this gets through the end of the year.
Yes, ma'am. We hope so.
I would hope. Other comments or questions? Senator Sears, you all set?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right. So I guess that's pretty straightforward, Commissioner. Appreciate your willingness to talk with us today. And if we have any questions or anything, well, we know how to get hold of you. So
Yep. Yes, you do.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us. Take care.
Bye. So at this point, we are down to the reports. And I don't know, do you want to take a break until 3 and then we come back and go through and finish up the reports?
That's up to you. I mean, you're the one that has the big trip.
We could just kick that can down the road further. We have to do
I have
it
until the
before.
19th. We have a deadline.
We have a deadline.
We have a deadline. And so I want to get it done today. I think the way we left, we were moving right along. We had agreement that all those housing reports should be consolidated into one.
Yep.
And we had really done a lot of elimination, basically saying if people needed it, ask for it.
We have 2 pages
Yep, we do.
left. Do we?
So my question is,
No,
shall we
3.
just,
No,
keep-
2.
do you want to take a break or just keep going? All right.
When was the,
Well, we got as far
We did
as,
the top one on the next to last page.
Yeah. which had to do with department temporary employees, and we got rid of it.
Yep.
Said you could get the information as you needed, so.
Performance accountability requirements, contracts and grants for the agency of administration.
I don't even, let me see.
top of page 4? Is that where you're going?
Yes, we're, 3 BSA, 2313B. Agency of Administration, performance accountability requirements for contracts and grants. To me, the biggest thing is whenever you're doing a contract and grants, being very specific in terms of deliverables and how to hold the contractor accountable, because so many times it's sort of like the insurance. You'll say this didn't work, basically you get into a lot of debate. So writing a contract isn't hard. I don't know. We don't use it. We don't use it. Accountability requirements in contracts and grants.
So we can ask for it if we need it.
I think so. And it seems like really what we should be concerned about is contracts and grants with specific deliverables so you can hold the vendor accountable. And I don't see, I would think that would obviously be dependent on the nature of the service or the, whatever you're contracting for. All right, so we're gonna get rid of that. The cost of implementation of renewable energy systems I think that seems like we could ask for that. Cost of implementation and installation of renewable energy
We
systems.
can ask for it.
Okay, and you're our energy person.
Yeah, it's weird, I didn't know that existed, yeah.
Same with the next one, we can ask for it.
Come up with our concern, okay. VHCB,
And I guess some of these, like, we never heard from Tucker, like, is the 2022 meaning that it's expired? I guess they were just sending it to appropriations. Okay, yeah, so when you say ask for it, meaning or feel it,
That's still there,
yeah,
well, the information's still.
it's still there, it's still
This is
collecting
what you
it,
call
but
hiding.
we're hiding it, but they're not producing.
they're going through the whole expense of doing an official report. They might give you the data, but it might be in a memo.
Right.
As opposed to some elaborate 50-page report that nobody reads.
Right, yeah,
Well, maybe
which I
some
just
do.
wrote one.
All right, BHCD, boards, activities and financing the preceding year.
We need that.
I think we do need that. So what column is that? I've lost the
Just
headaches.
check it.
Extend,
The second one's extend, the third is.
retain.
Okay.
All right, so we want to retain that for now? Okay. Clean Water Board recommendations, allocation of funds from Clean Water Fund.
That one should be published as well.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, some of these, even though they have the information, you could ask for them. It's helpful just to be able to go to the website, find the report and get.
Yeah.
You know, we do not need to know the food stamp error rate.
No.
All right, we'll get rid of that. I think that must have been left over when we were getting, choices for care, proposed reinvestment of savings. I would say we need that. That's,
Are there savings?
We do want that.
yes, there are sometimes. Green Mountain Care Board, expenditure analysis, healthcare spending estimate.
Yes, we want that.
You want that? Annual report on IT and cybersecurity.
We can ask for it.
That would be
That should
Jai
go to
Talk.
that
Should go to Jai
committee.
Talk.
It shouldn't, all the rest of those committee, but Jai Talk should be the one that gets that.
You're right. Maybe you should get that until Dry Talk gets its feet up on the ground.
She's been there for how many years, were you there?
I don't remember.
Okay, so the extra.
We haven't made any more progress on integrated eligibility in my absence. So digital services, what do we want to say? Defer to Jai Talk?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yes,
What about the next one? Does that do the same
Strategic
thing?
plan.
they ought to be added to.
Those two should go together, right?
Yep,
Other. Report of substance misuse prevention oversight and advisory council.
Oh, yes, Yeah, let's keep that one. Let's keep that one.
Is that critical to you, Center Alliance?
It is initially, yes.
It is initially.
Prevention oversight and advisory council.
Just a report on the council's doing a report probably every year.
Substance
What they
misuse
do.
prevention.
So they're an oversight
I
and
can ask
advisory
for it.
council?
Yes, I intend to ask for that information, so why don't we just say we'll ask for it?
Okay, that's first column then. Retirement funds, integrity funds?
Yeah, funds, integrity funds, what does that mean?
That's when they submit a budget. Comes from
Do you
the
know what
government.
that means? I think it might mean that you're fully funding our retirement obligation. I don't know.
Oh, it is, it's the, it has to do with the users, section in the executive summary budget that comes out every year. They always, do a little summary.
What are integrity? Integrity, how do you like the spelling of integrity?
It's about the contribution levels.
Integrity. Yeah.
Looks like gritty.
It looks good, exactly.
Looks a little dirty.
integrity.
Let's keep it.
Retirement fund, integrity funds. And I am the oversight of the pension retirement, and I don't know what that means.
I was gonna ask you, but.
Well, you better get
What
rid
is
of
it, what's an integrity fund?
And it has no dates. I want to know, so it's just an ongoing part of the budget. So why not just say, keep it as a budget? There's no report here, it's
No.
just part of the budget.
Is that,
All right, we're
is
not,
that about not falling behind?
I don't know, let me have a conversation with Chris.
That would be good.
All right.
And if Chris had, had
Here's one upon
recommend-
request. Well, let's get rid of that one because we already, have got it upon request. What is it?
Over time,
Oh, plans to achieve and preserve fiscal integrity of, oh, well.
we don't care. Yeah.
You just finished the
When
book.
was that done? When do we do that?
It doesn't say for that one, or.
Oh,
We can ask
well, let
her
me-
for a
I'll talk to-
plan.
Huh?
Probably
We can
not.
ask both.
Yeah,
I think Chris ought to rewrite these.
yeah, well. All right,
I wanna know that we're not falling behind in this way.
we are not falling behind, I can tell you that.
Of our
For what?
pension.
On our integrity fund?
Yeah, I'm not saying now, but going forward into the future, they ought to have the report in front of, something in front of them, highlighted for people.
That's why we created the oversight committee.
Yep.
The problem with reports is that you get I get overloaded with them as
Yeah.
judiciary. And they all come when we're back in session and everything else is going on. We schedule them for, and we're as guilty as anyone because we always give them permission to be late, but they're always come in January and not in December.
So I'm going to suggest that we are done.
I suggest we're done.
At your suggestion, and I'm going to adjourn for today.
We're roasted.
And we're going to, go off